This week's Heresy Thursday poses a fascinating question when it comes to producing content on YouTube. How do you create that perfect mix of clickbait and fact when something is so completely predictable that there is no way to spin it into being exciting? At this point, I think it's fair to say that clickbait has kind of lost its meaning to some degree, especially when it comes to thumbnails or titles. Titles where you pose a question are often described as clickbait, and things where you overemphasize particular issues with certain things, or indeed just leave out key information, that can also be classed as clickbait quite often, even if the whole point of doing that is so that you don't give away the reason for watching the video in the first place. I think it's genuinely difficult to tread the fine line between making a title that is both catchy and interesting and draws people in, without ending up seeming as though you're trying to be hyperbolic or really trying to get people in with something that isn't necessarily related to the video as a whole. And that's before we even get started on the idea of using titles as punchlines or as the setup to jokes, which I like doing a lot but doesn't always go over all that well because it sets up an expectation for what the opinion will be, even though that's not the actual opinion presented in the video itself. The fact is though that pretty much everyone who makes videos wants people to see those videos. No one's sitting there and putting work into content and then thinking to themselves, man, I really hope nobody watches this. That would be perfect. It'd be brilliant if I could do all of this and put it on the internet and then no one ever see it. That's exactly what I want from a YouTube channel. No one thinks that. And I think it's reasonable to suggest that at their core, pretty much anyone who makes videos on this platform wants you to click them more often than they don't want you to. So with all that in mind, how does one create an exciting, provocative title or thumbnail for these particular Ultramarine helmets? I think that's where the challenge lies for this one, because if we're being totally honest, if we're being completely blunt, they look fine. That's pretty much it. There's not really anything going on here, is there? There's nothing in the way of extreme over-ornamentation. They don't look particularly fancy. There's nothing in there that really makes them stand out from the standard beaky helmets, except they've got a couple of extra lines on them for some reason, and I couldn't even really tell you what those reasons are. I don't even know that the extra lines kind of fill that niche with the Ultramarines where they like being quite decorated but not quite to the extent of the Blood Angels, except sometimes they do go a bit overboard. These are just they're just sort of beaky helmets with a couple of extra lines and that's it. And I don't know how to spin that. I don't know how to make that exciting. I don't know how to talk about that in any way other than saying what I just said. So instead I sit here and ponder how to present this in such a way that you, the viewer, would want to watch this video in the first place, because we're even starting at a disadvantage here when it comes to making a thumbnail, because I'm going to put these in the thumbnail, but you're just going to look at those and go, yeah, they're beaky helmets, totally, yeah, definitely. I can see the beak. Brilliant. Now we could then go into doing like the whole blurring thing, so you maybe take the helmet but you blur it a bit so you can't see exactly what's going on with the helmet, but then that gives the suggestion of it being grander or more interesting than it actually is. And we're not really posing a question about the helmets here, which is I think the acceptable time to do that, where you're kind of building up mystery as to what this thing could possibly be, except we know what these are going to be, so that feels like it would be a bit cheap. There's not really any point doing a direct comparison to other helmets for some of the other legions, because by and large they are at least a little bit more fancy than this, and these pretty much are just exactly what I expect from a set of beaky helmets to begin with, and not even ones that are specific to the Ultramarines, so I don't know if they really fulfill the criteria for that either. Can't even go for the classic silhouette approach for the thumbnail either, because it's just going to look like a blob. It's just going to look like a weird blob, because the beak is so not like visible when this is like just done in silhouette. If it was just black and there was no colour, you don't have any sort of shading or gradient or anything, so you can't tell what the beak bit is, so that would just make it look weird. And also it's Thursday, so people would probably guess that it was a Heresy Thursday thing anyway. Really what these helmets have done has highlighted to me the difficulty in making certain things fun and exciting when it comes to content, as opposed to actually thinking about whether these are good for the Ultramarines or not. I'll be honest, I'm kind of fresh out of ideas for this one. I mean, they look like beakies, and but there are a couple of them. Some of them have got a U on them, so you know they're for Ultramarines. That's how you know, because there's a U on them. And that's pretty much it. And then even that is not a satisfying conclusion, because that's something that's patently obvious just by seeing it in the first place. So there's really no added value from the extra commentary there. I think the best thing that I can say about these is that they really have given me something of an existential crisis over the entire process and presentation of making content on YouTube. By contrast, the Iron Hands helmets, they look really good. Not as good as the Mark III, but still pretty tasty nonetheless.